Dear friends, today we shall be discussing about Pranayama, a term that is often used in Indian philosophy, in the yoga system, and most of the times it gets associated with breath control, which certainly is true but not 100% true. In fact, pranayama doesn't have much to do with breath, just as the food doesn't have much to do with the spoon that you eat with it. It is a convenience that we use spoon or fork or whatever to put the food in mouth. So also breath is the means by which it is the pranayama actually is practiced. But pranayama itself is not breath control, it is far, far deeper than that. And today we shall therefore try to look into it at a little more depth. Many times, especially with the availability of so much information on the internet, it is easy to get confused because a lot of it is put forth by those who are casual readers and somehow has stumbled upon some yogic practices, especially the Hatha Yoga practices, and then they speak about pranayama as having different ways of breathing. Breathing is certainly important, but we have to see where from its importance stems. Certainly we all breathe. It is actually not correct even to say that we breathe. Breathing happens in our case. Most of us do not actually consciously breathe. The breathing is just going on. There is no such idea or not just that kind of awareness that I am breathing. Breathing is happening. So certainly it helps to look at the breath as I am breathing and be aware of it. We shall soon see that how that plays a very important role. But first of all, let us try to understand this word in depth. Pranayama. This has actually a background of Sankhya and Vedanta philosophy. In Sankhya, and it is accepted by Vedanta as well up to a point. But our discussion is not going to go much beyond that point anyway. So, that this whole universe is a combination of matter and the force that moves that matter. All matter, here matter also includes the gross matter as well as the subtle matter. It is the great sages, they had a very broad vision. The idea of matter was not just confined to what is apparent to our, say, gross eyes or the gross senses, but they include matter which is at a subtle level which we perceive, not that we do not perceive. Think of what you see in dreams. They say a table in the dream. That is a table, it is matter, but not perceived by these eyes. You can touch that table in dream, but not with these touch sense organs. It is, you can taste the food in dream and may say, wow, delicious in dream. And yet you are asleep, you are not by this mouth, you are not eating anything. That also is matter, friends. And when one says matter in the terms of Sankhyas or Vedantists, both these matters, the matter that is perceivable by our physical senses and the matter that is perceivable by our subtle senses, both are taken into cognition. Both these are matter. And there is a term that is called Akasha, which loosely gets translated. Swami Vivekananda at that time translated it as ether, because that was the closest word he thought would be able to fit the description. And these days many authors, they use a different term, they call it space, that especially following the Einstein's this theory of relativity, where everything is actually space at different vibration, at different state of modulation. What we call matter is nothing but the space with a different curvature. It is actually a geometry that is making a difference, like matter and space, the curved space, and we don't want to get too much into the details of it, it's not necessary, but the idea is that the space includes all matter. In the ancient classification by Sankhyas and Vedantists, all matter is included in Akasha. From that it manifests. Akasha, and this Akasha comes from the primal reality, the truth, which according to Sankhyas, now here comes the difference between Sankhya and Vedanta. Sankhya understand that these are the two different realities. That one is called conscious entity, the Purusha, and one the inert entity, the matter, that is called Prakriti. So from Prakriti and Purusha, somehow mysteriously they combine, and you get all the matter getting modified by the intervention of Purusha, the conscious entity. Purusha is a conscious entity that is somehow getting embedded into matter. Like we see, just for comparison, look at this. We are this body, but we are conscious. Now, how the consciousness has entered into the bones and the blood and all that, we know surely that we are a conscious entity. We know that we are alive. But now, how the bones become alive, how the blood and the muscles and everything becomes alive, it is a very difficult thing to explain. So, the Sankhyas assume that these two principles, they combine with each other. In Vedanta, they say that there are no two principles. It is one self that appears as all this. It alone expresses itself as matter and the relative consciousness associated with that matter. There are not really two, it is one, appearing as many. But keeping that aside, if we see this Akasha, the primordial matter. Now, if you see that as one, there is no movement there at all. There is no movement in the one matter as a whole. But when there is multiplicity, that makes for movement, that makes for change. So actually the first expression of this prana is seeing multiplicity. This is actually, now people can understand it because most of us talk of information technology and we understand information as a force, a power. It actually is, but when we are glued just to physical forces, we don't understand that how information is a force. Yeah, information makes for movement, just as electricity makes for movement, just as the other forces make for movement. Before even they come into picture, it is the information. Information is therefore the primal force that makes for movement. That is, at that level, that is called then prana, where we see instead of one, we start seeing many. In one, there is no possibility of interaction. For interaction, you need two. Just interaction, even when, can I use this word, I am interacting with myself, sounds silly, but if I use, then there also I have to imagine one I and another I, both interacting with each other, like in many novels and all it is shown, and that the different people inside, they are having conversations. Should I do this? Should I not do this? So two are created there and so a conversation, an interaction can go on where there are two. So that stroke where instead of in that state, instead of perception of multiplicity, a perception of oneness, we start perceiving multiplicity. Now the movement is possible. Now exchange is possible. And this exchange happens on the basis first of information. One can easily see that. For example, see, I become aware, I am this body, and there is this apple in front of me. I am hungry. See, this is all information. I am hungry. That apple is capable of, removing my hunger to some extent. Now, this information gives rise to physical motion. I stretch my hand. The force comes into play. So, it happens at the level of information. So, this is a prana at the level of consciousness or awareness that manifests into the physical motion of different types. And prana is also seen, therefore, as the highest awareness also is called prana. In Vedas, in Upanishads especially, and Bhagavad Gita, this word prana comes as this, that it is an all-pervading entity, like in Mundaka Upanishad, you read, Prano hi esha sarva bhutair vibhati. It is prana alone that manifests as all different beings. So, in Kathopanishad, you read, Ya pranena sambhavati aditir devata mayi. that by prana, this force, this mother of all this progeny called Aditi manifest. So, this prana is therefore all the primal existence, and then that gets variegated. This is the first step of manifestation of force, power. And the word ayama, prana is therefore the universal power, including the power of information, power of consciousness. And ayama has quite a few meanings. Ayama means stretching, expanding. So, the universalization of the force is called pranayama too. That is, understanding the power that is playing through these fingers is actually an expression of the universal power. This is the pranayama takes us to that level, that condition where we can see the universality of prana, the power. Then also it means control. Actually, both are related. When we do not have control of power, then the power just gets frittered away. It is no more available to us. When we can control it, then that power becomes immense. So it is learning to control the prana, the power, including the power of this, as I mentioned, which needs to be remembered. Otherwise, just control of breath is not going to be of much spiritual use. It is many times this question gets asked, that if I do the breathing control, how is it going to lead to spiritual realization? Well, it can lead as an instrument if you associate your thought process with it. That is the cardinal part in doing. Otherwise, the breathing exercises are helpful for, physical wellness and so forth. But as far as the spiritual aspect of it goes, it is to be used along with the thought process. Therefore, to initiate that thought process, sometimes some sacred word like Om is used. Okay, with Om now you breathe, and then remember Om as the name of the divine. Om contains everything. It is so. With that, the process in the mind starts changing. Now, let us come how it happens. This is a great discovery, friends, that we want to control the mind. Actually, the sages and all of us, it doesn't need to be a sage to understand this. Any fool can understand that all my worries, all my problems, all my bondages are because my mind is not under my control. Nobody else really needs to tell this to me. I can easily see that. No scriptures are necessary to tell me this, that my problems are because I do not have control over my mind. Now comes the question, how can then I have control over mind? Which seems to be terribly, terribly difficult, as described in Patanjali's yoga aphorisms and very graphically and strongly presented by Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita as his doubt. In the 6th chapter, that wonderful verse comes that Arjuna asked that, well, Lord Krishna, you had been describing the process of meditation and with that how to control the mind and so forth. But I see the mind to be so very uncontrollable. I don't see a way to, have a handle on controlling the mind. That is it, friends. We do not have a way to, even see how the mind is moving about, let alone controlling it. The example that I give many times, that we have some semblance of control over body. We can bring body to the Vedanta society and make the body sit on the chairs here. Can we make the mind sit here? It just slips away. We do not become even conscious. Afterwards, suddenly, sometimes we become conscious. Oh, I wasn't listening at all. The mind was going here, there. So, to control the mind is a big challenge. And how can one accomplish it? The means to do that was discovered as breath. The breath, it is physical. You have some control over it. I mean, you can think, let me breathe fast or let me breathe slow. You can, when the doctor is doing some checkup, they tell you, now take a deep breath. Now, if we had no control over breath, there was no point in telling it to us. So, there is some semblance of control on breath. Yeah, they tell, okay, and now breathe a little fast, breathe slow, breathe fast, and so forth. Hold the breath. Why it is being told? Because we have some control over breath. Now, another thing we see is all our emotions, they get reflected in breath. If we observe, we see. This is matter of just observation. That when we get, say, angry, then the breath changes. When there is upsurge of, say, greed, the breath changes. Upsurge of lust, the breath changes. There is upsurge of any other, when one is afraid, fear comes up, the breath changes. So also with all the desirable emotions, the breath gets, suitably changed. The emotions get mapped into breath. We can easily observe that. And if the observation is done with lot of meticulous and kind of objective sense, then we will be able to discover what breath corresponds to what emotion. So if you now are able to control the breath, what happens? Now that emotion also gets controlled. This is many times used, not in a big spiritual way, but as a practical means to control anger. For a little while, you are feeling very agitated and angry, and maybe you will go and give a big blow to the fellow, and you know that it is going to be disastrous. I shouldn't be doing it in this situation at least. If I find that fellow alone sometimes, it is a different thing, but it is, when all of them are sitting here, not a good idea to do it. So, it is now told, the wise people tell that hold your breath. And don't, take deep breaths, hold it, slowly release it. So the expression of anger then subsides for that time. Now this very technique is used to actually therefore control all the different emotions through training of breath. Some very simple breathing techniques are advised in pranayama. So many, different techniques, Kapalabhati and in Hatha Yoga they have been described. Patanjali in describing pranayama does not go in that line at all. It is, but in many Hatha Yoga techniques you see different types of pranayama are described. They are very good, but they also put a note of caution that it may hurt you if you do not practice them under proper guidance. So, therefore, but for spiritual journey, all these different types of 100 types of pranayamas are really not needed. Because the job for a spiritual aspirant is different, in a way simpler, in a way difficult. Simpler means you don't have to really go through all these tedious breathing processes. What is needed is to use breathing. And as we did in the meditation earlier, use your breath as a vehicle for purity. And you will see the personalities being filled with purity. It is a very helpful thing. Also, we can see that the mind gets calmed down when the breathing is done in a particular way. Of course, this should not be applied to that, okay, if you are running and then the breathing has to be, correspondingly fast and then at that time if you think of doing this pranayama could be disastrous. Maybe that could be last breath that you would be taking in. So it is, don't do it at that time. But therefore it is described that you sit on a asana, means in a proper seat, in a proper posture and do it. So you can do we can do a little practice. You see, put these two fingers up like this, this index finger and the middle finger, press it down, and the thumb of the right hand. Now, with the thumb of the right hand, press the right nostril and inhale with the left nostril for 4 seconds. Then with these two fingers close both the nostrils and hold the breath for 16 seconds. Then release from the right nostril in 8 seconds. It has to, this is very important. Releasing should be gradual, slow. 8 seconds should be given for that. So this is the ratio that 1:4:2. Then do it by the other nostril. This is, one should be doing this by both nostrils. It is when you do one time more by the left nostril than the right nostril, means inhaling one time more by the left nostril, then it is supposed to make you active. Calm but active. If you do it one extra time by the right nostril, it is said that that is good for sleeping. So now don't do it. It is so it is, and if you are doing equally by both nostrils, then it is good just for sitting in meditation. So this is a technique, and then associate the process of thought to it. When we do it, now instead of doing just 4 seconds, let those 4 seconds be filled with these all the holy emotions, and let them percolate through the whole personality, through the whole body. Let all these holy emotions, let them be filled. And all the negativity, the toxins, all that, emotional toxins, let them be all discarded through the right nostril. And similarly by the reverse thing also, same, the inhaling, exhaling, and then we will feel that our personality is filled with all positive thinking and the holy emotions and so forth. Also, in a higher level of pranayama, what happens is that one gets rid of the present all the network of nerves. You know, right now all our sensations as well as corresponding actions, it is all controlled by the nervous system. These nerves are very much akin to wires. These tiny wires, they are connected all over. It is very similar to the electric signals. So, when we are receiving something, then these nerves, they help. If therefore the nerves are damaged, for example, visual nerve damage, then the eye as instrument may be fine, but we will not be able to see and so forth. So it is these nerves on which we depend on all this process of understanding and action. Whole life is controlled actually by this network of nerves. Yogi wants to go beyond it by opening another channel by using this breath. It is hit with this these thoughts that I am divine, and then that breath is imagined to hit at the bottom of what is called Sushumna channel. All the nerves, they go through Ida and Pingala, these two canals, and then the Sushumna canal is in the middle. Through that, it is empty. There are no nerves in it. But through that, the yogi learns to do all this without wires, wireless transmission, wireless reception. And the things become so fast and so efficient that you get rid of this whole network of wires. Do you know, many of you would remember when we had to use all the wired network for phones, how difficult it was. It is that was so cumbersome. I remember just a long distance call in India, and I was screaming, and that fellow could hear only a little bit, and there was so many problems. That line would get blocked, and so many. Now you see, with wireless technology, how easy it has become. So this is the same, you can understand that how the power will increase in us. In fact, when we get rid of this, the necessity of this nervous system, the life changes. We get connected to the whole universe. All powers then become kind of available to us. It is like networking, wireless networking without, you have like sitting here, now people understand it, that I have the access to so many different databases and the programs which I don't need to be, having on my little machine. They are on what is called cloud. It is. So I get access to that universally. When I get rid of this network, I don't need it anymore. My dependency on that is gone. Now imagine I can establish the connection with the whole universe as I. And that is liberation. Thank you, friends. If you have any questions or want some point to be more amplified, you can ask. Yes, Charles?
What determines if we should practice this?
What determines?
If we should practice the breath control.
Well, if you want all this, you can practice breath control. But good that you asked this question. The very intricate ways of, modulating, controlling breath, they have to be practiced under an expert. Because what happens is, I told earlier that the breath is connected with emotions, and then every emotion has a connection to breath. Now this is all very well set. Now if you want to change it, you need to have knowledge of it, otherwise this whole machinery will get completely disturbed. It is like an intricate machine. If I open and then dabble, fool around the different things, I spoil it, that's all. So therefore, at least now we have what is called the default factory setting. If I want to change it and I don't know how to, and still I fool around and make mess of it, then that is what happens. And therefore it is advised that don't try to do it. Moreover, as I mentioned, that the intricate, those breath controls, they are not a must for spiritual illumination. In fact, in many books on pranayama, and which Sri Ramakrishna used to stress a lot, that is the love for God, the devotion, that is doing it for you without any risks involved. If you develop this love, then that will have the effect of pranayama. You will form the connection, because that was how the end result of pranayama through breath control is, that you form a loving relation with God, that entity that is universe. So you become then connected with God through love, and that is that has its own risk. I don't say that it has no risk at all, but comparatively less than dabbling too much into intricate methods of breath control without having proper guidance. And I tell it often because actually I have seen a few people who tried that, and their brain functions got so disturbed. For them, even to think with normal logic has become somewhat difficult. So, therefore, it is important that we don't go into these without getting the guidance of an expert teacher, and also we should see that is it necessary for me to do that? Is there another way? If there is a risk-free highway to go to a place, do I need to go through the intricate lanes and where there is also a risk involved? Better, you go by the safe way, unless you have somebody to guide you through that passage. Yes, Shrikant?
Is that mapping between emotions and breath unique, or does it vary between person to person, also within a person during different times?
That's a good question. Difficult to tell. It is. They say that it is unique for all, but again there are some specialities from person to person depending on the upbringing of that person, like certain words and certain gestures, they indicate one thing in one culture and another thing in another culture. It is like in India many do to say yes, they do like this. Now, of course, for Americans it is like saying no. It is. So it is, such similar changes could be there in this also. Yeah. So one has to be very observant. That is another reason that the whole process could be a bit intricate, difficult, but not impossible.
So it's more of the person has to do it himself or herself rather than someone else judging for you.
Someone else has to guide you. It is, and that person therefore should have the competence. It is, you have to observe yourself, but then how the breath needs to be guided, needs to be learned from that person. Yeah. Yes, Shrabani?
The breathing sequence that you showed, is that also that somebody can do independently or needs guidance?
Well, that as long as you do not do it too much, that is quite safe. It is not necessary for almost all people. That would be a safe way to do it. But don't start like, let me pull in for 32 seconds. Later on one can do it with practice. But initially it is good to start, that because 32 seconds inhaling will be, that itself will be almost impossible. To keep on inhaling for 32 seconds, try, not possible easily. So don't attempt some such, too high goals to begin with. Go slowly. So it is, but that is without any risks. Yes, please.
Is there I mean, when it is pretty intense practice if you are not established in like kind of or not. You know what I mean? Like, if you're not established in, like understanding what is like ethical or moral or right.
Of course, yeah, you are right.
Then really,
Yeah.
even like speaking about it wouldn't, isn't
Yeah.
kind of a,
Yeah, that's a good point, that the breathing exercise have some necessary accompaniments when it can be successful. Like certain medications tell you that if you are going to take this medication, you have to avoid this and avoid that and take this as an additional substitute, make your lifestyle corresponding to that. So yes, certain, if I am practicing pranayama and then harboring a strong enmity to somebody and wanting to use pranayama to give me the power to eliminate that fellow, then it will lead to some disastrous results. There has to be, therefore, the moral adjuncts that go with it. All those things need to be practiced. One should be grounded in that to practice those things. Otherwise it is difficult, because you are handling a lot of power. So therefore it is advised that we should be well grounded in basic moral ideas. If not, it will be disastrous for us. It is because it is, we need to be very responsible. It is we are handling a very powerful instrument. If you are just going on a bicycle, you don't need to go to that registry and get license for that, because it is not a very powerful thing, it is. You may, if something happens, you may get killed yourself or minor something. It is comparatively. It is. But if you are driving say a motored vehicle, then you need to have a license for it, because now you have to be more responsible. You are handling more power. If you are going to fly a plane, something more needs to be done for that. It is not anybody can say that, I will go and fly a spaceship. No, it is more powerful an instrument. It is you need license to carry your penknife. You don't need to have a license, but to carry a gun, even in America, you need a license, you see. So it is. So it is like that. The more power that you are handling, the more responsible one has to be. Handling irresponsibly something is, that is why we have so much of debate over the nuclear arms falling in the hands of terrorists and so forth. We don't debate much over, a rifle falling in the hands of the terrorists. It is much easier to handle that rather than if the terrorists get nuclear weapons. So, therefore, it is right that moral, this cultivation of our awareness is necessary for that. Thank you.